And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
Welcome back to the 11th hour. That was last week's big story. Remember, the President of the United States admitting he was thinking about the Russia investigation when he made the decision to fire James Comey. In that same interview, he also denied ever asking James Comey to stop the investigation.
Did you ask him to drop the investigation?
No, never.
Did anyone from the White House?
No, in fact, I want the investigation speeded up.
Did anyone from the White House ask him to end the investigation?
No, why would we do that?
Any surrogates on behalf of the White House?
Not that I know of.
Joining our conversation, former Department of Justice prosecutor, now professor at Georgetown Law School, Paul Butler, and Jill Wine-Banks, one of the special prosecutors during the Watergate scandal and former general counsel to the United States Army. Counselors, welcome to you both. Paul, the question first goes to you. Obstruction of justice, one of those terms very easy to use. We've read about it. We've seen it in movies. Does this begin to fit here, to your mind?
You bet you, Brian. So obstruction of justice, an attempt to influence or impede judicial or congressional investigation corruptly. You have to do it corruptly. That word is doing a lot of work here. Lawyers look for smoking gun evidence. What do we know about this conversation between Trump and Comey? Before he had the conversation, he asked the Attorney General and the Vice President to leave the room. Sessions, the Attorney General, is thinking to himself, look, I'm Comey's boss. I need to be here. He has to say. Trump says, no, you need to get out. That's what lawyers call consciousness of guilt. Now, we're a long way from a criminal prosecution. We're a long way away from impeachment. But is there damning evidence against Donald Trump today? Yes, there is.
Jill, same question.
I give the same answer. We are well on our way to impeachment, because I think there's a clear set of facts that show obstruction of justice. Having prosecuted the Watergate case and seen obstruction up close, I could say this is exactly the same thing. Firing Comey is exactly what happened when you fire Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor. You're interfering with an investigation. You're trying to get it to shut down. And now we have the added memo that shows that he asked Comey to stop investigating Flynn in addition. So instead, he's pursuing a totally phony investigation of voter fraud, of which there is no evidence, while trying to shut down the investigation of Russian hacking and Russian interference with our democracy. That's obstruction of justice.
Because that's a heck of a thing you just said, tell our good viewers what they should look for in terms of the mechanism and how what you're describing could possibly happen with Republicans in control of the White House, House, and Senate.
Well, I was addressing the legal issue. There is a political issue. And in this time of gerrymandered Congress with no bipartisanship, I am concerned that we might never get there. We need a special prosecutor. That is one of the things that might help to unravel all of the facts. We need to subpoena the tapes. We need to get Comey's memo. These are pieces of critical evidence that I think will show, without a doubt, wrongdoing by the president, and we need to do those. So politically, whether there can be an impeachment, will take a public outcry, much like what happened on the Saturday Night Massacre. The president at the time, Nixon, refused to give the tapes that had been subpoenaed, in which the courts had said we had a right to. He fired the special prosecutor. The public outcry was so enormous that 3 days after the Saturday Night Massacre, he was forced to take a U-turn. He had to hire a new special prosecutor. He agreed to turn over the tapes. And then, much like what's happening now, there was a drip, drip of bad evidence. He revealed that 3 of the tapes were missing, even though he said he was going to give them to us. And then a month after we had a hearing on those 3 missing tapes, we had an announcement that there was an 18-minute gap in the 4th tape. So we have an 18-minute gap and an 18-day delay in firing the National Security Advisor.
which is why everyone over 50 knows the name Rosemary Woods to this day,
yes.
the secretary who got blamed for that. Paul, I see you shaking your head. And my question has to do with Ron Rosenstein. You worked with him at Justice. Think about why there are people walking around in this country knowing his name today. Because it's his memo, the 3-page underpinning that the world spent, 36 hours believing was the cause for the firing, perhaps, of Comey, that he had been mean to Hillary in her emails. In effect, we then hear the boss say, oh, no, Comey was a goner from the beginning. Think of the weight that rests now with the acting the acting AG because of the recusal of Sessions.
So it's partly personal, Brian. He got played by President Trump, and I'm sure that he doesn't appreciate that. But more importantly, it's about faith in the integrity of our government and our elected leaders. Look, now Trump's position is, I didn't have that conversation with Comey. So Comey, as the Rosenstein memo said, exercised incredibly bad judgment when he made all those allegations against Hillary Clinton. He disregarded the chain of command. But this is not a guy who was a liar. He tells the truth. If anything, he's too forthcoming. So if the most Trump can say is this conversation didn't happen, you better believe that Comey has evidence that it did. One reason why lawyers take contemporary notes is you don't want to rely on your memory for something this important. So he wrote it down as it happened. Congress will get that, and at some point a prosecutor will get that same memo, and then there will be consequences.
Forgive me, I called him Ron and not Rod. Jill, for people who are going to learn a lot about this story, and they're sitting at home wondering how anyone, even James Comey, can rely on a contemporaneous memorializing memorandum to file coming out of a conversation which was not, to our knowledge at least, recorded. Talk about the practice, the standard, and what a James Comey, with his work habits, would be able to put together that would be faithful to quotes he had just heard in the Oval Office.
I would say, much like H.R. Haldeman kept voluminous notes of every conversation he ever had with the president, conversations that became, of course, critical evidence in the Watergate case. From everything I've heard, Comey had a habit, a practice of recording things. And of course, as an FBI agent, all FBI agents are trained to record contemporaneously everything they hear and to write it down as exactly as they can. So I truly believe that if we get a copy of this memo, and I'm assuming that it's true, that there is one, I think it will be very important evidence to be used. As, of course, the president threatened that there were tapes, it would certainly be interesting. I'd love to hear those tapes, and I hope that they will be subpoenaed and will be provided if they actually exist, instead of being something the president was just boasting about.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.